After what happened at Copa America, I wouldn't be surprised if CONCACAF just isn't invited to Copa America anymore. So first and foremost, before I rip into the CONCACAF teams, I just want to say I owe Canada an apology. I pretty much called them broke bums in my CONCACAF preview video, and I also pretty much misprofiled the entire squad. And they have gone on to prove me wrong. They would end up being the last CONCACAF team standing as they reached the semi-final. It wasn't pretty, but Jesse Marsch found a way, and ultimately Argentina got the best of them, but of course they did. It's Argentina. And did anyone really expect Canada to beat Argentina after the first time they played? Not really. So you kind of expected it, right? And for that, I can hold up my hands and say, I'm sorry, Canada, you proved me wrong. So let's get out the way. Of course, I'm going to rip into Mexico and the US men's national team, but let's get into Jamaica and Panama's time in Copa America first. So for Jamaica, this is probably the worst Jamaican performance since the Bob Marley movie that came out. I'm saying this was absolutely just shocking from Jamaica. All things considered, with the team they had and the opponents that they faced, they could have done a whole lot better, and they really underperformed like crazy. They got pretty much skunked in the group stage. They lost to a very bad Mexican side that honestly, if they probably just tried a little bit harder, they could have beaten. And then after that, they would end up losing to a pretty powerful Ecuadorian side, where really Jamaica, that's the one game where you could say they were completely outclassed, at least on paper. They then lost to a Venezuelan team that was on a little bit of a dark horse run, but again, if they maybe just apply themselves a little bit better, summon the spirits of Usain Bolt, summon the spirits of Robbie from AFTV, and we might be seeing a different outcome for Jamaica in this group stage. But this was just pathetic. They're just very poor. They didn't show any attacking promise. For how they play, they defended so poorly as well. Honestly, at this point, call up my man Raheem Sterling, because he's definitely not touching the English national team anytime soon. Call up anyone that you can find with any ounce of Jamaican heritage. I might even have a little bit of Jamaican in me. I'll be waiting for the call, but Jamaica, your time at Copa America was short-lived, and deservedly so. Next up, we have Panama. So Panama, all things considered, did not do too bad. They did lose to Uruguay, which, I mean, this is an Uruguayan side that is in red hot form, so that's really understandable. They then played the US, who completely capitulated against Panama, and they were able to just take advantage of that fully, which you could say showed how ruthless they were for doing so. They smelled blood and they did not turn back, and after that they found themselves beating the worst team in the tournament to secure a spot in the quarterfinals, where, to their disadvantage, they had to play this unbeaten Colombian side. And just for a quick second, did anyone really think that it was going to be Panama who put an end to this unbeaten Colombian run? I don't really think so. Ultimately though, Panama did show a whole lot of fight in this tournament. Despite not being the most talented squad on paper, they outscored a lot of other teams in this tournament. And although they did concede a lot, it was clear that their intentions were to give everything they had for every game they played. Too bad they got absolutely terrorized by Colombia in their last match. But all things considered, Panama definitely overperformed what many people probably expected them to do, in large part due to the fact that the US completely capitulated against them. Jamaica, Canada, and Panama all accounted for. It's time we get to the last two big fish. What to say about La Selección? At this point, I am completely lost for words how bad this team is. There was very little expectation going into this Copa America, at least for myself, because I'm a little bit more realistic. In all honesty, I think there's a huge portion of Mexican fans who expected us to go to the semifinals, or maybe even to the finals if you're very delusional. But realistically, the expectations were low. With the group that we were in especially, there was a very good opportunity for us to get out of the group stage one way or another, and yet we completely failed. We were promised some young revolution with this Mexican team that was going into this tournament, and that was just complete bullshit. The young players that were brought to this tournament barely even saw the field. Players like Antuna played so many minutes in this tournament for no reason. El Piojo barely got a sniff on the pitch. Alexis Vega barely got a sniff on the pitch. What was the point of bringing these players if you're not gonna play them? Lozano, tell me that, please. On top of that, we had players like Santi Jimenez, who finally was given a chance to play, and then the system that we designed just pretty much completely took him out of the game. Lozano gave pretty much the creative keys to our two wingers, Quiñones and Antuna, who are terrible. At least in this tournament, they were completely nullified in every single game, and when they did get the chance to maybe give Jimenez some service, the balls would just go completely over him. I mean, this was absolutely pathetic. On top of that, our creativity lacked midfield so much, especially in the last two games, the game against Venezuela and then the game against Ecuador, where Charlie Rodriguez just put in some of the worst performances of his life. I mean, I'm saying this guy is just a vacuum for any creativity that is possible in this midfield. On top of that, to make the problems even worse, we lost our best player, by far the leader of our team, Edson Alvarez, to the fantastic pitches that we have here in the United States. So he was out of the equation very early on, just made our midfield dynamic even worse. Only shining light for this tournament for Mexico was Johan Vazquez and Cesar Montes. They looked incredibly solid. If we can keep building the team around them, Edson and Jimenez, we might have a chance at doing something in the next World Cup, but honestly, it's not looking pretty. Apparently, our next friendly after this tournament is going to be against New Zealand, which is why New Zealand? Clearly, we need to be testing ourselves. Why are we playing New Zealand? You know what? Matter of fact, maybe they're our level now. Maybe we just need to accept teams like New Zealand are the teams that we need to be facing, because that's the level that we're at. And then the freaking Federation, apparently we're going to keep Jaime Lozano for the next tournament for probably until 2026. There is no vision. We didn't show any type of good game plan in these matches. There was no good rotation that indicated that Lozano was learning from his mistakes. There was just a whole lot of nothing. And then add to that the fact that we were promised some young revolution, like I mentioned, and that was all pretty much bullshit. Goes to show we have no vision. Mexico was completely embarrassed in this tournament. We were pathetic. Even if we had gotten out of the group stage by some lucky miracle, we would have had to play Argentina, who realistically would have probably demolished us. We got embarrassed. We were the laughing stock of the tournament. This was just pathetic. I hope to see change. Again, as I mentioned in videos in the past, I hate to be pessimistic about La Selección, but at this point, we're down bad. If we're being real, we're down bad. The one saving grace that we have probably gotten out of this very embarrassing tournament is that I think teams in Liga MX are finally realizing that we need to let our talents go abroad. So we have some players that look like they're going to be going abroad. Tuna's even on that list. We have players potentially going to the Danish league. Johan Vazquez, who's currently playing for Genoa, has some interest from Inter Milan, which could also be fantastic for him. Chino Huerta also has some interest from teams in the Bundesliga, Greek league, Verona as well. Even regardless if we're talking about the Greek league here, we finally have transfer news and movements for these players who might be able to finally get a chance to eclipse the current level that they're at. With Mexico, we just got completely embarrassed this tournament, but I mean, there's nothing much else to say. I've kind of been talking about it for the last handful of months. Thank you guys for all the support on that Mexico video. It's getting pushed again because of how bad we were, but thank you guys for the support on that video. So with that being out the way, let's talk about the last big fish, the good old US of A. So USA, just like Mexico, got pretty much embarrassed. I'd say the biggest difference between Mexico and the US is the expectations coming into this tournament. So with the US, you have this team full of talent that is playing in Europe, Premier League, the Bundesliga, all these top European leagues. So people expected a good run from this team, but in steps Berhalter. Berhalter is the American Southgate. He is the American Didier Deschamps. The fact that this guy got fired, the US had so much time to find another coach that could have pushed this team full of stars to a next level, and then due to nepotism in the US Federation, the man gets rehired for the job just to display the same boring tactics over and over and over again, resulted in the US failing to meet the expectations that were set on them. They managed to get past Bolivia really easily, which again, very much expected, probably one of the worst teams in this tournament. They then, like I mentioned earlier, capitulated completely against Panama, a game that realistically they should have won and could have secured them the spot in the quarterfinals. And then they pretty much just like any single ounce of threat in that game against Uruguay, where they lost probably due to some poor refereeing, but realistically they didn't deserve to win that game either. And even if they drew 0-0, they would have been out of the tournament regardless. That game, also the game that saw them exit the tournament, displayed how little of a backbone Berhalter has. The fact that when Bolivia equalized against Panama, he signaled to his players that the score was 1-1, and then Uruguay scored 20 seconds later. That's just poetic, if you ask me. That's just beautiful. So now there's so many questions, right? You have Fox News acting like this is LeBron James making his decision to move to Miami, announcing when the Federation's gonna decide if this guy's keeping his job or not. It's a clown show here in the US, I'm not gonna lie. Pundits like Alexi Lalas and Carly Lloyd just hyping up this mid-ass team, which is only really mid because of the coach. It's just also embarrassing. Opposite to Mexico, this is just an easy fix for the US. Just get a competent coach. You have players like Pulisic, Balogun, Gio Reyna, McKennie, Anthony Robinson, all these great players that play for good teams, and you have a coach like Berhalter. At that point, just get me. I could probably do just the same amount of work as Berhalter or better, honestly. At this point, just get a good coach. The US, that's all they need. If they can get a good coach now so that they can work on stuff for 2026, it's gonna be another long tournament for them that's just gonna be full of more embarrassment, especially because of the fact that, again, they fired this guy and then rehired him. So at the moment, the US is cooked, but we'll have to wait and see what happens happens down the line. So the US actually fired Berhalter. Looks like they learned from their mistakes. Hopefully they don't rehire him again, but as of right now, Berhalter is gone. At the moment, Mexico is an embarrassment, the US is an embarrassment, and then we have Canada, who was pushing through. It wasn't pretty, but they got to a very far point in the tournament, definitely a point where no one really expected them to get to, so you have to give them their flowers. No matter what, they got there at the end of the day. Football is a results-based business, so still a great feat nonetheless. But to sum it all up, CONCACAF is dog water. They're terrible, they're not very good. CONCACAF needs some help, especially the big dogs, US, Mexico, Canada. They all need to improve drastically. But of course, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Ultimately, a lot of great football in this tournament, so despite CONCACAF's shortcomings, despite Mexico's shortcomings, still some good football to watch. But if you got to this point of the video, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Thank you much for watching. Peace.